after 1971, we went to a pure debt-based system. Well, you got to pay interest on that debt. And so that just accelerates the inflation. And now we're at the end. And so when you hear everybody being so confused about the market action, about the currency, what's happening in the currency markets and this and that and the other thing, it's because we're at the end.
Today, we are fortunate to be joined by Lynette Zang. She's admired and respected within the precious metals community, and she's going to share with us some of her insights into what she sees developing within the gold and silver sectors. Lynette, welcome to Ron's Basement.
I'm very happy to be here, Ron. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, on behalf of everyone joining us today, like I said, you're someone who's looked up to and respected within this community. And
I'm honored.
yeah, well, I have a question for you. One of my viewers from the United Kingdom sent this over, and it's actually for another one of my viewers, but he enclosed these 18 US paper dollars, and it's what he brought back from his trip to Las Vegas, and he called it Las Vegas toilet paper. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the value of the US dollar and where we might be heading?
Well, actually, I've been studying currencies and currency life cycles since 1987. And there is absolutely zero doubt in my mind, zero doubt, but that this is the end of this fiat money experiment. And what they're trying to do is transition us into the next iteration of the fiat money experience or experiment, which is really a full surveillance monetary system. And that's what makes having silver and gold in your possession so critical. So, I mean, there's no doubt.
And I guess you're referring to the potential for or the oncoming inevitability of a CBDC type environment.
I am. Where you hear my hesitation is, yes, it is inevitable that they're going to bring it out, but it is not inevitable that it will be adopted. That's going to be up to the community and to the population because, we vote with our purses, we vote with our wallets. So if you're buying gold and silver, that's your vote. If you're keeping it in this garbage, I mean, there are over 4,800 currencies, fiat money currencies that do not exist anymore. And ours is going exactly, this crap is going the same way. This is just a derivative of this and of this, right? But this is real money. This is fake.
Yeah, it's interesting. I heard a statistic recently that since the Federal Reserve came into existence, the US dollar has lost like 97% of its value.
Yes, and my favorite graph, and everybody that watches knows I like my charts and my graphs, but if you said to me you could only work with one, it would be the purchasing power graph from the Federal Reserve, because you can see the whole story right there. And you can explain the whole story just from that one graph. And yeah, it's going to zero because that's what happens. Because this is, especially after 1971, we went to a pure debt-based system. Well, you got to pay interest on that debt. And so that just accelerates the inflation. And now we're at the end. And so when you hear everybody being so confused about the market action, about the currency, what's happening in the currency markets and this and that and the other thing, it's because we're at the end. So it is confusing because things aren't working the way the system was set up to function. They're not functioning the same way. But nobody ever says, well, this must be the end of the system. Well, they can't. They're cheerleaders for the system, so they can't actually say that. But you and I can say it.
I can say, yeah. I told somebody earlier, I did a live stream earlier. I said, don't expect when you walk into your bank that, usually they have those placards up offering you 1% on a checking account or whatever. Don't expect for there to be a placard up that says, hey, we're having financial trouble. We just wanted to let you know that things aren't looking good here. I have a question for you. I've studied this 1971 Nixon order that took us off the gold standard. And in my mind, what they essentially did with silver and gold at that point, because the U.S. was the dominant world power at that time frame, was it's almost like they put silver and gold in jail temporarily. Like they couldn't kill it, but they had a real interest in dissuading, especially the American public, from buying silver and gold.
Absolutely.
And it feels like to me that now there's a renewed interest and a renewed, I won't say a new era, but it feels like not just in the United States, but even throughout the world, that there's a new wave or a new movement of people kind of waking up to the value of silver and gold.
I would agree with that. You know, I mean, they created the spot market to manage, and these are their words, they're not my words, to manage people's perception of particularly gold, because gold is the primary currency metal, and a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. And if you know, or once you know, I should say, that that currency is actually dying and going away, then you start to make different choices. And you start to take your wealth outside of the system. I mean, I'm an ex-banker. I'm an ex-stockbroker. Do you know how many stocks or bonds or mutual funds or ETFs or annuities or CDs? Do you know how much of that I have? Zero.
Zero.
Because I understand the language and I understand what they're doing. And I was there in the 80s as everything was really kind of kicking off and all this talk about globalization. So they needed to really trap you in it. But this is the interesting thing. Gold and silver is part of our DNA. It's part of our vernacular. The golden goose, the golden rule, when they create the cryptocurrencies, what color are they? They're either gold or they're silver, right? Yeah. So, you know, it's part of our DNA. And yes, I agree with you. I think especially with this rapid inflation, that makes the demise of the currency more obvious to the general public. And they're starting to go, wait a minute. You know, here, this is the American dream. You're supposed to, if you work hard, you can have your own home, you can raise a family, you can get educated, you can send your kids, all of this stuff, you can have the American dream. But more and more of the younger people past my generation are waking up to the fact that that American dream is always going to be out of their reach. They go to college, but what kind of income do they make after that? But they're saddled with all of this debt. Now that's going away. Of course, they have to, they got a little bit of a reprieve for a few years. That's now going away. But people are getting very discouraged and they don't believe the American dream is possible anymore. And so that's why I say, absolutely, it's inevitable that they're going to bring out the new CBDCs, the surveillance economy, because they want even more control than they have with this stuff. But we don't have to accept it, right? If we hold most of our wealth inside of this is our vote. And guess what? If there's just a very vocal 3% that get this, well, that's all they needed for the Revolutionary War. A very vocal 3%.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear Rick Rule and other people talk about the fact that only like 0.5% of the world's financial wealth or assets is invested into silver and gold. And long term, the average is 2%, and it's gotten as high as 5%. But even if we get back to 2%, that's 4 times as much quote unquote money going into the precious metals and related investments. I want to touch on something.
Could I just kind of tweak that a little bit and say that you will have a lot more transferring out of this fake fiat money into real money. Real money. That's what this is.
You know, one of the guys who helps me with the channel a lot, his name's he goes by Coin Shop Chris, and he's a stickler. Because I'll say, oh, I bought some silver. He says, you're not buying silver. You're converting paper money into real money. And I say, you know,
absolutely agree.
You know, I grew up in the United States, so I'm part of the, I was taught, I buy and buy. It's like, no, you're not buying gold and silver, you're converting. The other interesting thing you brought up was how silver and gold are in our DNA. I have twin 11-year-old daughters,
I
and
have
they
twins
play.
too.
Oh, you do? Well,
I
awesome.
do, but they're 42.
Mine are 11.
You'll survive.
Yeah, we're surviving. If you hear any loud noises upstairs, you'll know what it is. You'll understand. Yeah. But every game they play, pretty much without exception, every little game on their tablet or their phone or on the TV, the prize is always a silver or gold coin. It's like the most valuable thing in the game. And, like you said, if I did this about a year ago, I put into Google images, I did a search for Bitcoin, and all the images that came up were a gold coin. So it is in our DNA, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it is.
What about the system in general? As you were
What
referring
about
to
the system?
what about? Yeah. Well, I want to get your take on this, because it's my feeling that as the system, quote unquote, has become more convoluted, more papering over, like the little bank, little big, however you want to say it. It was big because it was bigger than all the banks that went bust during the great financial crisis. But the little situation we had with banks back in March, like they paper over everything. And but that the problems, the more duct tape, however you want to say it, as it gets bigger and bigger, that it becomes more delicate and fragile.
Correct.
And that it requires faster response. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, absolutely. It's like the little Dutch boy that's putting his fingers in the dike, and before you know it, he's got all his fingers and all his toes in the dike, but there's another leak that springs up. So yeah, there's absolutely no doubt about it that they can and do paper over it. But here's the problem. Well,
You'll have
I
to
wish
ask.
that would happen to them. Honestly, I do.
I was going to say you need to talk to Jerome. He'll tell you how to fix that real fast.
I should totally talk to Jerome. But here's the problem, and you can see it when they first came out with the quantitative easing. So money for free, all of this money printing. Every iteration afterwards took a lot more money, and they were getting a lot less result. And they have been on this quantitative easing. And even now, they call it quantitative tightening, but globally, money is still extremely loose. Whenever you have interest rates that are below the real rate of inflation, that's easy money. I don't care if you had interest rates at 20%, right? If the rate of inflation is at 30%, that's still easy money. So, for them to talk about tightening is kind of garbage, but it is becoming more and more challenging for people to roll, or corporations or governments or whatever, to roll over that debt. So in some ways there's easing, and some ways there's tightening. Just like, look at the Bank of Japan, right? They lost control of their yield curve control, but I've done pieces on that historically as they've been going along. So it's pretty obvious that they were losing control. But rather than making it obvious to the public, what did they do? They broadened their band. They did that on Friday, and on Monday, they announced a major bond buying program. I mean, those are just the opposite. So what does that tell us? Because Bank of Japan is really the leader in the world of all of these experiments, these monetary experiments. And that started back in the early 90s. And, they're the ones that created the zombie firms. So, and this yield curve control. Okay, so you print a whole bunch of money and you go in and you buy a whole bunch of bonds to control the price. And all that really does is convolute interest rates out there, the value of the money, the price of the money. So, when I see that on Friday they did loosening, and on Monday they did tightening, because what happened, boy, shocker, interest rates exploded on their 10-year JGB, of which they own most of that anyway. Yeah, it tells me that we are closer and closer and closer to the end of this experiment. And I think what we just saw with the Bank of Japan is the canary in the coal mine. And I'm paying a lot of attention because it ain't over yet. Just like the bank eruption that we had in March. But do you think all those issues, those underwater investments went away? Do you think they're not at Bank of America and God forbid JP Morgan and every other bank on the planet? Of course they are. They're just being hidden. But how long can they do that? That's really what the question is, not what's going to happen. It's exactly when. So now, look at this. No, did you know there's not going to be a recession?
Yeah, I know.
And I'm really relieved because Janet Yellen came out a while ago and said there would not be another financial crisis in her lifetime. So now that we know there's not going to be another recession, I guess that means she gets to live longer.
And didn't they also tell us just 2 or 3 years ago that inflation would not be a problem, and then it was temporary, and then it was transitory? And didn't Jerome Powell himself just like what 2 years ago tell us that they wouldn't raise interest rates till the end of 2023? So that means you and I should be sitting here right now talking about how we still have 0% interest rates, but maybe in November or December the Fed's going to raise rates, and we know that they're, at the tail end maybe of one of the fastest interest rate hike sessions in history.
Well, likely they are at the tail end of that because that's what Wall Street wants. The problem is that we haven't really felt the full effect. I mean, the economy has not yet felt the full effect of that rapid rise in interest rates because of the lag effect. So this is the good thing about CBDCs, and especially when you read what they say, because they will have their finger on that button 24/7 and they will get instant response if their policy choices are working. That, I don't know about you, but that scares the Hades out of me.
Well, it does, and I think it goes with what we were talking about earlier, that as the system has become so convoluted that they will have to react instantaneously just to control what's going on. And and I want to get your opinion on this as well, as you were talking about what's going on with Japan and to a certain extent, I think even with our Fed. I question whether our Fed really wants to fight inflation because can we really, I mean, if they really fight inflation, the system implodes. So the analogy I like to use, it's like if you've got a fire going, which is the system, and you've got a fire hose in one hand and you're putting it out, but with your other hand, you're kind of secretly continuing to flame it. Does that make sense?
That makes every bit of sense in the world because that's exactly what they've been doing. But on top of that, people need to understand that inflation is not a monetary phenomenon. You had true, when we were on a gold and silver standard, you had true supply and demand economics. So it'd go up, it'd go down, it would vary, right? That's a normal business cycle. But with this garbage, if you read what they were saying when they first put this in place, it was inflation was baked into the system because not one man in a million understands inflation. And even Christine Lagarde, the head of the ECB, and Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, admitted they do not understand inflation. So the Fed's job is not about fighting inflation because it's part of the fiat money system. It is about controlling the rate and the speed of that inflation. But the reality is, and I've been saying this since 2008, that's when the system actually died.
Yeah.
And they weren't ready with the next iteration of money. They still had work to do. So that's when the quantitative easing, the free money, that flow to make it appear like it's okay. But I still know people that have not recouped from 2008.
Wow. Yeah.
I bet you we all do know it. I bet you some of us out there that are watching goes, well, yeah.
Yeah. But doesn't it feel like, I often use this example, in my neighborhood, we have a community pool. There's 400 houses here. And if I go to my community pool and try to talk about what you and I just talked about for the last 15 minutes, 99% of the people will look at me cross-eyed and think that I'm like most people, I think, and I can't speak for other countries, but it seems like in the United States, most people are just asleep. And do you think there will be an event that'll occur some point in the future, maybe could be a month from now, maybe it's 10 years from, I mean, who knows,
Maybe it's
where
tomorrow.
maybe it's tomorrow, where people will be or be forced to face, face the music, I guess you would say.
Yes, and I think that that opened a lot of eyes because, as you said earlier, that you're seeing more and more people that are looking at gold and silver, and that's what the rapid inflation does. So that's why it's so critically important that 2% target. They're still getting your wealth. It's still costing you more money every day, every year to buy the same goods and services. But if it happens slowly enough, that price stability mandate is not about keeping the price of this cup or the food or anything else stable. It's about your expectations. So that if you don't think that inflation is too big a problem, then you don't ask for more money. But when inflation heats up like it is now, or it has been, I mean, it hasn't gone away, no matter what they say, it's really going to get worse, especially if they start to reverse course on interest rates. But they can't, that genie is out of the bottle.
Yeah.
That genie is done. We're at the end. I don't care what they say. I don't care how they juggle their formulas to make it look this way or that way. Once people start seeing it in their daily lives, it's like a veil is lifted. And you can't really blame people. I mean, I've had a number of people say to me, well, I try and tell my friends and they don't listen, so they're just going to have to deal with it. Well, frankly, we're all going to have to deal with it. But what we're really asking people to do is have a major paradigm shift. Admit that since the day they were born, they have been told a lie and they have believed a lie. That is very uncomfortable for most people.
Yeah.
So I can understand that. I have empathy with it. I'm trying to feed the world between my urban farm here, and I was never a gardener. I mean, I'd go and help my sister, and we always had a little kitchen garden, but that was never really my thing. Yet today, I am absolutely a farmer, both down here and at my bug out location, because food becomes the single biggest issue for people during these transitions. And I'm trying to feed as many people as possible.
Wow, that's admirable. If what about your business? You're with ITM Trading, is that correct?
Yes, that is
And
correct.
you help people that want to move some of their or convert some of their paper money into fiat currency. What are there any things that set ITM Trading apart from the other companies in that industry?
Huge. Number one, they have me. And I've been there since 2002 and been absolutely instrumental in developing everything. But beyond that, what we have is a strategy that's based upon my research and all of my studies on currencies and currency life cycles since 1987. And it's just based upon repeatable patterns. So repeatable patterns, so you can see the shift and understand where we are in this trend cycle, which is why I can sit here with absolute confidence and tell you we're at the end, because all of those patterns that we've seen in over 4,800 currencies that do not exist anymore are all flashing red like right now. So I think we're in the lull before the storm, but we are very, very close. And I think we're very, very close to that full surveillance economy too. So what makes ITM different, because obviously we work in physical gold and silver, but there's silver and then there's silver and there's gold and then there's gold. And so what our strategy does, it starts with your goals. What is it that you are trying to accomplish? Everybody's strategy is basically the same. It's the same as mine. but I'm at a different point in my life. I have different goals, maybe than you do, maybe not. Maybe they're exactly the same, in which case your portfolio would look very much like my portfolio. So you start with the goals and the circumstance and what you have to work with. And it's definitely more of a comprehensive strategy that we use at ITM. So you have your money at the base to make sure that whatever fiat money assets you've managed to accumulate that you choose not to or cannot convert are protected. But beyond that, right now we have these income producing assets that are at nosebleed level valuations. And we have gold and silver that are super duper cheap. That's going to flip flop. If you're in the right asset at the right time, then you can take some of those gains, convert it into those undervalued income producing assets that we know which ones will now survive. Because right now, frankly, that's a big question. Who's going to survive this? And then you can be actually better off on the other side of this than you are going into it. Because as you said before, what, 0.5% of the population owns gold? So that's a wealth transfer tool. And hey, you might as well be the one to have the wealth transfer your way, in my opinion.
I agree. The like sentiment about gold and silver between you and I is real high, right? Like we love it, and the people watching, joining us right now, likely are very optimistic and interested in silver and gold. But overall, especially when I talk to people in the mining sector, which is different than what you and I are talking about, they say sentiment is low. And overall, outside of you and I, right, most of the rest of the people, the other 99 out of 100 people, they don't care, or they think it's bad, whatever. I like to bring up something that I think is optimistic for our sector, and that is that the price measured in fiat US dollars has done pretty well, and silver, hung in there pretty well. That, let's say gold in particular, if in the next year it can get to an all-time high measured nominally in US dollars, and it's doing that, carrying that weight of like super low sentiment. Only imagine then if it gets to new all-time highs and sentiment just gets a little bit better, just a teeny bit better, that we could really be in for some potential large price increases.
Well, let's kind of look at that for a minute, because that's not ever the way that I think about gold and silver.
Sure.
Because this is insurance, but it's also a strategy. And let's say that tomorrow spot gold goes to $6,000 an ounce. Are you going to sell your gold? And what if silver goes to $900 an ounce? Are you going to sell your silver? So I'm not looking for the market change of sentiment as far as the nominal price of gold and silver are concerned. What I'm looking at is what the central banks are doing, because at the end of the day, when all confidence is lost in the currency, in the powers that be, and that's my fondest wish, that's really what my battle is. When all that confidence is lost and they're trying to regain that confidence, then they do those overnight revaluations where they take this garbage that is only used in one area and they revalue it in this area that is in gold and silver too, that are used in every single sector of the global economy. So if you look back, like in Venezuela, that happens to be the one that I can remember the easiest. Don't ask me why, because it's happened so many times. But the first overnight revaluation they did, spot gold in Venezuelan bolivars went up 3,500%. Did it express to its full fundamental value? No, not yet. But that's, for me, what I'm waiting for. Because what happens is it gives you an opportunity to pay off any fixed rate debt that you have with dollars that have zero value, right? It gives you an opportunity to buy those now undervalued assets that we know are most likely to make it because they've made it that far. right? It's really hard looking at the balance sheet since so many things are done off balance sheet to know whether or not a company is actually really solvent, because there's just so many ways that you can juggle that accounting. So that's it. It isn't in the spot market. That's Wall Street's market, and JP Morgan Chase and other bullion banks and other traders are tasked with suppressing it. It's when the central banks, who have been loading up on more gold than they ever have before, because they know what's happening, they want to keep their choices, they want to stay in control, right? They're loading up on gold right now. Let's see. Who knows more about money than central bankers? Why wouldn't you just do what they're doing and doing for themselves? Because it's interesting. There was just a little headline that came out how gold is directionless. They don't say spot gold. They say gold is directionless because Fed Chair Powell says he's not going to lower rates for 2 years. Who cares, right?
Right.
The lie is that gold doesn't pay any interest. Who cares? So if the interest rates are staying up high on this crap that is truly crap, right? Big deal. 1 trillion times 0 is 0. And it really is just that simple. So that's really what I'm waiting for. Wall Street's job is not to push the price of gold. It's amazing that it's not still down at $600 an ounce or even $20 an ounce, because they can create as much gold that does not nor ever will exist as they want to. That part's easy peasy. In the physical only market, what do you see? You see gold making new highs, especially in the ultra rarities category, which is the only category that the 1%ers, I mean, that's what they can afford. I can't afford $8 million for a coin, right? And you don't have to spend $8 million on the coin. Just personally, I want to be in that category. So you can still, and understand, I don't really know anything about pricing because I don't really work in that area anymore, but I do buy for myself and for my legacy gold, and that's the kind of gold that will be passed down from generation to generation to generation. For that part of my gold portfolio, yeah, I'll go above fundamental value, but then I'm in the rarefied air area, which is what I like.
Right.
But again, there's different kinds of gold for different kinds of things. I like fractional pieces for property taxes because look at the Depression. You could own your house outright, but if you could not pay your property taxes, you lost your house. So little fractional gold coins are absolutely fabulous to maintain your ability to always pay your property taxes. You know, silver, the different sizes of all of this stuff. You can't look at the spot market and expect that you're seeing the truth. Here's my question. Why does anybody trust Wall Street? Have we not all been screwed enough?
Yeah. I say the same thing about Washington, right? Like,
Totally.
we totally like, it's strange that when you see the results of like the Gallup polls of do you approve of your congressmen and senators, and they're like all-time low, but then people will just take the information they're fed from their government as like the almighty truth. And I'm like, why would you believe that? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Can I ask you one final question? You've been very generous.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, you've been very generous. I started my channel about 1.5 years ago.
Congratulations.
I've noticed,
it's hard work.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for right. It is, but it's worth it. And I've met wonderful people, many of whom I'm sure are watching us right now. Really, and we talked about this before we went online, that a lot of the people, most all the people in the gold and silver sector are very nice and they're very smart as well. But I've noticed a trend in the last 1.5 years, a definite trend that there are more women watching my videos and maybe more women getting into stacking. And I asked my wife, Susie, I said, do you think it's because of my boyish good looks? And she laughed at me. So do you see, and that was a joke, of course, but But
Well, you are a
do you,
very nice looking man, so
yeah, well, well,
you
maybe.
know,
Yeah, but we'll go on for another hour now. No, but do you see more women, and they're awesome, and they're like more and more are coming to my channel and engaging in the conversation. Do you see that trend at all?
I do, but I've probably always kind of been a bit of a trendsetter anyway. Because when
Hmm.
I became a stockbroker, there wasn't even 3% of the stockbrokers were female.
Wow.
And right. And the same thing in the gold industry. There were like, I only knew of like one other female in the industry. That has
Hmm.
certainly been changing. So
Hmm.
yes, and I'll tell you something else, and I discovered this when I was a stockbroker, or realized it when I was a stockbroker. Um, you know, Number one, any woman entering a field or looking at a field that is kind of more unique to what they would look at,
Hmm.
do more due diligence. They do a lot more
Wow.
research, right?
Yeah.
So they're more inquisitive because they understand that they're behind the eight ball to begin with,
Hmm.
right?
And they really want to be there.
Absolutely. And I've
Yeah.
also unfortunately known a lot of women that have relied on their male partners to manage their wealth, and that wealth has been managed away from them.
Hmm.
So I strongly encourage everybody, male, female, I don't really care. But I think that I strongly encourage everybody to do their own due diligence and to listen to a lot of different opinions and what
Yeah.
one makes the most sense to you. Because that's all anybody can give you is an opinion.
Hmm.
Now, I act on my opinions because I've been doing this on some level since I was like 10, probably younger than that, really. Um, but I applaud it. And I
Yeah.
also see a lot more younger people getting involved, which
Yeah.
I really applaud because that's the generation that's comfortable the most with all of this electronic. I mean, the younger you get, the more comfortable they are because they've grown up with it. But I'm going to be 69 in a few months. So, I'm not used to this loss of privacy and just giving everything up so easily and all of this technology. I look at it with a weary eye because of my age and, the generation that I was born into. I think that more and more younger people are looking at these things with a weary eye because they know they can't
Hmm.
achieve the American dream that was promised to them.
Hmm.
So, and that's who's going to create the revolution. And I
Right.
think we probably do have a revolution near in our horizon. I'm sorry, but we need it. We need it because otherwise the system's going to remain completely unfair. And we have an opportunity right now in this change to create a much more fair system.
Yeah.
Vote with your wallets, vote with your purses. That's what's going to matter at the end of the day. And that's what's going to save you and put you in the best position as well.
Thank you, Lynette. This has been great. On behalf of everyone watching and myself, what an honor and a treat to get to hear from you. If they want to learn more about ITM Trading, what is it, itmtrading.com?
Yes, and we have a very active YouTube channel. I mean, I'm constantly publishing on that. But
Hmm.
you can't now. You can buy food with this, even in the worst of circumstances, but you can't really eat this. So I'm a huge advocate on everybody being as independent and self-sufficient as possible. So we have another site called Beyond Gold and Silver, and that
Oh.
one is all around my mantra, which is food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter.
Okay.
And we're really active on that to meet people wherever they are. If you've never planted anything in your life, okie dokie, there you go. We're going to show you how to do it. If you are a master, come join us and help teach people. And in
Okay.
that, we have what's called thriverscommunity.com, which is where everybody comes together and does share everything. So yeah, we're very holistic in our approach because you need everything. It's not
Yeah.
this is that and that's that. I became an urban farmer because of my study in economics. And I went, holy
Mhm.
crap, I see what's coming. So, I changed my plans a lot in
Yeah.
2008, changed all my plans.
Very interesting. Yeah, food is obviously critical to our survival, and people ask me as well, like, well, how much silver should I own? And I, like you, like, I can give you my opinion, but it's just that you need to figure out but it's also important to have, secured your food supply, water supply, relationships. I mean, I think really
Community, so
community
critical.
is, yeah, you gotta have good and maybe have some skills that other people need so you can help other people as well. And it's going to be an interesting decade ahead of us, right? Hopefully during that decade I'll get to speak with you again.
Absolutely, but just kind of going back to what you were saying a little bit earlier about people ask you, well, how much silver should I have? How much gold
Hmm.
should I have? Well, there is historic data based upon your current cost of living and what is and where we are, what the true value is right now. So we actually have formulas that can calculate that out
Oh, wow.
based
Okay.
upon your current circumstances. And they're
Okay.
just based on history. So
Okay.
that's
Interesting. And,
look, I've
and
been doing this seriously on some level since I was 10 years old. And probably earlier than that, but that was with my Uncle Al. And there's no doubt in my mind, I know I have been groomed for this moment in time.
yeah.
And I am so appreciative.
Yeah, and I know it feels like, how do I say this? Like it's never going to happen until it does happen, right? And then it happens. And um, people, I would encourage, and I know you do as well, encourage people to be prepared mentally and I guess physically and monetarily, everything else for what appears, because it has, that's what I like to point out, like, and I love the fact that you have those 45 or 4,800, you said, different fiat currencies that have come and
Well,
gone.
there's not 4,800 here, but oh
Right.
yeah, even
Yeah, that,
even
like,
U.S. currencies. I have
yeah,
gold certificates here. This is a Confederate $10 Confederate note,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Can you go out shopping with this? No. This is a state of Florida bill back when the
Yeah.
states were printing their own money. I mean, so it isn't. It's and then what's this? This is a Bolivar. Venezuelan Bolivar has more value as a napkin for an empanada. Or
Hmm.
whoa, this is good. Here's a $10 trillion Zimbabwe note. And what did
Yeah.
Zimbabwe do? And what is Zimbabwe? They came out with a 1 ounce gold coin last year, and this year they're trying to, it's going to be interesting, a CBDC backed by gold. Not
Hmm.
convertible into it, but
Right.
backed
But
by. So
supposedly the gold's there. Yeah, it's
presumably, right? Supposedly, yeah.
yeah,
Until you can
the
convert it, it ain't over.
yes, I agree with that 100%, because I get that question and pushback a lot from people, like with like Texas has a proposition to potentially develop a gold-backed digital currency, and I don't have a problem with that, and I know that the legislation does propose that it would be convertible,
Hmm.
but you better make sure that it's, and I'm not a big fan of regulation, but that it's regulated and audited, and make sure that gold is really there, the gold or silver. Then maybe I'm willing to look at it, but otherwise, no, thank you.
Right. It has to be convertible. And, I mean, they proposed that bill in March and it has gone nowhere. And that's
Hmm.
not the first proposal to have a gold back currency of some form. That comes up actually fairly regularly, but it's always just a proposal and then it doesn't go anywhere.
Hmm.
Right. And you're right. I mean, who was it? Ernest Hemingway, when asked, well, how did you go bankrupt? And he said, well, slowly at first and then fast.
Yeah.
That's the way it happens. It seems like nothing is happening because you can't see below the surface.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
can guarantee you tons and tons and tons of things are happening below the surface that they don't want us to know about. By the time you do, you're out of choices. You're
Yeah, when's the last time they forewarned us about a crisis, right? I mean, they never, right?
Never.
When's the last time a bank warned their customers that they might be in trouble? Never. It's just the way the system
And
works.
how
And
many people are being informed right now that their data is being hacked?
right,
Right? I
yeah,
mean, but yeah, let's move more in that direction, into that danger before you solve this problem. Let's just double down
right,
on it. You got to have physical gold, physical silver outside of the system. You can always put it in the system, but you can't always take it out. So this is like a critical thing. And do your own due diligence. Don't take my word for anything,
yeah,
but don't take anybody's word for anything. That's why in all of my work, I give you the links. I don't give you all
yeah,
the research links because you'd be reading a book, but I give you all the links. You read them. You come up with a different opinion, rock and roll hoochie coo. I can't tell you that my opinion is more valid, but I can tell you that if you don't do any due diligence and you just have a random opinion, no, it is not as valid as mine because I don't do random opinions. I do
yeah.
researched opinions.
Yeah, that's what I like to say, that like especially the people again who are watching right now that enjoy my channel, like we have the courage to at least pull our head out of the sand. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that we're going to make every perfect right decision, or but we're a step ahead of a lot of people because at least
Oh
we
yeah.
pulled our head out of the sand.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, thanks, Lynette. This has been great. It's been a real pleasure, and I really do hope that I get to spend some more time with you in the future.
Well, I've enjoyed it too, so I hope that happens as well. I don't manage that piece, but
Sure. Thank you.
you're welcome.